Good morning and welcome to the Daily Bible Podcast. My name is William Hemsworth and happy Christmas Eve to all of you out there listening. Hope you enjoy this time of the year with your families. I know it's a stressful time of year, but please remember the reason for the season. I know that's an old cliche, but it rings true. I mean, so many people are just stressed out this time of year thinking, I have to get the perfect gift for this person, for that person. And the reality is, gifts are great, they're fun, but that's not what the meaning of this whole thing is. But today we're moving on in Matthew chapter 3. We're going to look at Matthew chapter 3 verse 4. We're going to look at the figure of John the Baptist. I know in Matthew's gospel there's a few verses about him. I'm going one by one just because I think there's so much that we overlook that was so prevalent and seen to the ancient Jewish people and also to the early Christians. So I just want to kind of make those comparisons. But Matthew chapter 3 verse 4, we read, "Now John wore clothing of camel's hair with a leather belt around his waist, and his food was locusts and wild honey." Now we tend to read this and we see, great, here's this probably strange looking man, lives in the desert, wandering through, eating bugs, dipping his hand into beehives to get some sugar in his system and, the nutrients, the bee pollen, everything else that's in honey to survive. And we may think, what a strange living. We may even draw comparisons when we see a homeless person on the side of the road begging for something. There's so much more to this verse than meets the eye, though. You see, this figure of John wearing camel's hair brings on the image of Elijah from the Old Testament. And we see this in 2 Kings chapter 1 verse 8, which says, "They answered him, he wore a garment of haircloth with a girdle of leather about his loins. And he said, it is Elijah the Tishbite." So here is Matthew again. Matthew, being from the tribe of Levi, knew the Old Testament very well. He was probably trained to be a priest in the temple, in the synagogue, from an early age. And he draws this comparison because the Messiah needed a forerunner. Many thought it would be Elijah the prophet. And we see that this idea of the messenger in Malachi chapter 3 verse 1, which is, "I will send my messenger who will prepare the way before me." And many at that time, the religious leaders of the day, thought it would be Elijah the prophet. And actually later on in the book of the Old Testament book Malachi, I believe it's Malachi, hold on. Yeah, it is Malachi, chapter 4 verse 5. "See, I will send the prophet Elijah to you." So, that's kind of the forerunner. Matthew's drawn that comparison between John the Baptist and the Old Testament prophet Elijah, saying that this is Elijah. And not Elijah like reincarnated, but he's coming in the spirit of Elijah. And we see that later on in Matthew's Gospel too, in Matthew chapter 11, where he actually says that where Jesus said that John the Baptist was kind of in the figure, if you will, of Elijah. And how about locusts and wild honey? Here's another thing about John the Baptist, is John the Baptist was also in the tribe of Levi. His father, as we read in the Gospel of Luke, in the beginning of the Gospel of Luke, was high priest in the temple in Jerusalem before John was born. So John himself was a Levite, was most likely trained to be a priest when he was in a young age as well. Knew the scriptures, which were the Old Testament at the time, knew what he could and could not eat according to Levitical law. You see, the book of Leviticus lists, there's about 613 commandments in the book of Leviticus, and many of them deal with what foods are clean and unclean. And locusts are one of the few insects in that time in the Judean wilderness that were considered clean, that you were allowed to eat. This isn't accidental. John knew what he was doing. He knew what the law was. And it's something that we look over as well. It's not something that he was just starving and that's what he ate. He knew what he was eating. He knew what he could and could not eat. So it's just a little bit of thoughts on this passage. God bless you guys. Have a great day. Remember, it is about Jesus, not about the presents. Let's stop stressing so much. God bless you guys. Have a great day.